Like wise warriors, we can face each stage with dignity and openness, neither clinging to youth nor fearing what comes next. The skilled martial artist doesn't resist the opponent's energy but works with it, finding strength in yielding, power in acceptance. Similarly, those who age with awareness don't fight time's progression but align with it, discovering the particular powers, perspectives, and possibilities unique to each stage of life. There is a special authority that belongs to those who have lived through multiple cycles of history, a distinctive clarity available to those no longer distracted by concerns that consume the young, a unique freedom that comes when external validation becomes less important than internal integrity. So the question becomes, will you fight against time or embrace it with gratitude? Will you mourn what's behind or turn with curiosity toward what awaits? Will you spend precious life energy trying to appear as you once were, or invest that same energy in discovering who you are becoming? These aren't just philosophical questions, but practical ones that shape daily experience. The answers determine whether aging becomes a prolonged defeat or a continued adventure, whether the later chapters of life narrow into complaint or expand into wisdom. Aging is not the end of the book, but the beginning of its deepest passage. Consider how many great works of literature reveal their most profound insights in their final chapters. How the themes introduced early only make complete sense when seen in the fullness of the entire narrative. How the seemingly random events of early chapters reveal their purpose and pattern as the story approaches conclusion. What if human life follows this same narrative structure? What if the physical diminishments of later life are balanced by expansions of understanding that give meaning to everything that came before? We are not beings who age, lamenting lost youth, but evolving consciousnesses discovering new dimensions of existence with each passing year. Each decade brings its own terrain, its own questions, its own particular beauty. The 20s ask, who might I become, with all the anxiety and excitement of potential still unfulfilled. The 30s explore, how do I establish my place in the world as careers and relationships solidify? The 40s wonder, have I fulfilled my purpose, as midlife brings assessment and sometimes crisis. The 50s inquire, what really matters, as mortality becomes more than theoretical. The 60s consider, what will I leave behind, as legacy comes into focus. The 70s and beyond ask, what wisdom have I gathered to share, as the perspective lengthens to include the full arc of life. Each phase necessary, each with its own lessons impossible to access in any other time. True wisdom lies not in preserving what was, but in embracing what is becoming, not in freezing ourselves in amber at our most physically perfect moment, but in allowing ourselves to ripen fully through every season life offers us. The unfolding rather than the static. The journey rather than a single destination. This is the art of conscious aging, to greet each transformation not as loss, but as revelation. To recognize that the tree in autumn, releasing its leaves with grace, is not dying but preparing for renewal. That the changing tide reveals treasures the constant flood would keep hidden. That in releasing attachment to one form of beauty, we open ourselves to discovering others previously invisible to us. What if aging isn't something that happens to us, but something we actively participate in with awareness, intention, and even reverence? What if these changes aren't punishments to be endured, but initiations into deeper mysteries of existence? What if time's passage isn't robbing us of value, but revealing aspects of ourselves that have always been our truest wealth? These are the questions that Buddhism invites us to consider, not as abstract philosophy, but as practical guidance for transforming our relationship with time itself. Not as escape from reality, but as the most profound engagement with life's actual nature. This moment, right now, with whatever limitations, losses, and changes it contains, is not a diminished version of some previous golden age. It is life itself offering its particular wisdom in the only moment we ever truly have, the present one. And in that recognition lies the deepest freedom, to be fully alive at every age, to discover the particular gift that each stage of life uniquely offers, to recognize that true wealth lies not in holding back time's flow, but in being carried by it toward ever-deepening understanding of what it means to be fully human. And these hands, marked by decades of work and care, aren't diminished. They're symbols of service and capability. Look at your own hands for a moment. Consider what they've done over decades. The children they've cradled, the meals they've prepared, the gardens they've tended, the work they've accomplished, the comfort they've offered, the creativity they've expressed. These hands have been the primary instruments through which you've engaged with the world. Their changing appearance doesn't represent decline, but fullness, a visual testament to lives touched, tasks completed, love expressed through practical action. As outer perfection fades, something more profound emerges, beauty transformed from youthful superficiality to mature depth. This is the radiant presence that comes from authenticity and earned wisdom. There is a particular quality that develops in those who have made peace with their own aging, a gravitas combined with lightness, a seriousness alongside playfulness, a depth of presence that superficial attractiveness can never achieve. Think of the most compelling older people you've encountered. Their magnetism rarely comes from preserved youth, but from developed character, the authentic inhabiting of their own particular life story. Each mark of time can be worn not with shame, but with honor, badges that testify to the privilege of a journey many never get to complete. When we remember how many lives end before reaching even middle age, each additional year becomes not burden, but blessing. Each wrinkle represents thousands of expressions. Each grey hair marks challenges survived. Each changing contour reflects adaptation to life's demands. These aren't signs of failure, but of success. The success of continuing, of enduring, of remaining engaged with the great adventure of human existence long enough to be changed by it. Perhaps the most difficult aspect of aging is the intensification of grief. The longer we live, the more farewells we must say. Parents, mentors, friends, sometimes even children. The procession of departures lengthens with each decade. The holiday table that once overflowed with voices gradually grows quieter. The phone calls become fewer, the memorial services more frequent. The contact list in our phones includes people who will never again answer. The streets we walk are haunted by memories of companions who no longer share our path. This accumulation of absence can feel like an unbearable weight, a burden unique to those who've lived long enough to love and lose repeatedly. Buddhist tradition tells of Kisa Gautami, who lost her only child and sought medicine to bring him back to life. Wild with grief, clutching her dead child to her chest, she went from healer to healer, looking for someone who could reverse death's finality. Everyone turned her away with pity until she came to the Buddha. With great compassion, the Chui Buddha told her he needed a simple mustard seed, but only from a house where no one had ever died. He sent her into the village, giving her grief a purpose, a mission that might lead to healing. As she visited house after house, she discovered there was no family untouched by loss. At first house, my father died last winter. At another, we lost our daughter to fever. At a third, my husband never returned from the sea. Everywhere she went, she found people who had experienced the same pain she was enduring. Her grief connected her to humanity rather than isolating her. She began to understand that her suffering wasn't unique but universal, not a personal punishment, but the common experience of all who dare to love in a world of impermanence. When she returned to the Buddha empty-handed but wiser, she was ready to begin the real healing, not the impossible reversal of death, but the acceptance of life's fundamental nature. Buddhism teaches that while physical presence ends, the essence of those we've loved remains alive. Each memory, each value they helped shape, continues their influence in the world. The parent whose voice we still hear, offering guidance decades after their passing. The friend whose particular humor still makes us laugh though they're no longer here to share the joke. The mentor whose standards still inform our work long after they've ceased to evaluate it. These aren't just memories, but living influences, active forces that continue to shape our choices, perceptions, and actions. Our grief itself becomes a testament. The deeper the love, the more intense the grief. This pain is not punishment, but confirmation of love's significance. When someone's absence hurts deeply, it reflects how fully their presence mattered. The sharpness of loss is directly proportional to the richness of connection. Would we truly wish for relationships so superficial that their ending caused no pain? Or can we recognize that the capacity to grieve deeply is inseparable from the capacity to love profoundly? Perhaps grief is not the opposite of love, but its natural continuation under changed circumstances. This is the alchemy of remembrance, transforming physical absence into spiritual presence. And love becomes a living legacy when we embody the best of those who have departed through our own actions. When we adopt their kindest qualities, continue their unfinished work, express their deepest values through our choices, we become the carriers of their essence not just in memory but in living action. The mother who plants her father's favorite flowers each spring, the son who continues his mother's tradition of anonymous generosity, the friend who completes the work a departed companion began. These aren't just memorials but continuations, the thread of influence extending beyond individual lifespans. Buddhism suggests a radical reframing. Each wrinkle and grey hair is not a failure, but a medal awarded for surviving challenges, for loving despite loss, for continuing to grow when it would be easier to withdraw. The lines around our eyes testify to thousands of moments of laughter shared. The furrows in our brow mark nights spent in vigil for those we love. The softening contours of our face reflect decades of expressing the full range of human emotion. These are not flaws, they are honors, badges of a life fully inhabited. Each represents experiences that have expanded our capacity for understanding, compassion, and wisdom. The liberation comes not from denying time's passage, but from surrendering to life's natural flow. This surrender isn't resignation or defeat, it's a profound acceptance that aligns us with the fundamental rhythm of existence itself. When we stop fighting against what cannot be changed, we reclaim the energy once spent in resistance. When we cease pretending to be what we are not, we discover the freedom to fully become what we are. This is the path to deep peace that youth, with its necessary rebellions and striving, rarely knows. There is an ease available to those who no longer fight against their own nature, who no longer exhaust themselves trying to be what they are not, who understand that conforming to the season you're in brings its own particular joy. There is remarkable dignity in adaptation, spiritual strength that transcends physical limitation. Consider the pianist who can no longer play complex pieces but finds profound expression in simpler compositions. The hiker who exchanges mountain peaks for gentle forest paths and discovers new worlds in the undergrowth they once passed without seeing. The craftsperson who develops tools that accommodate changing abilities rather than abandoning beloved work. This isn't surrender, it's creative evolution, the same life force expressing itself in new forms adapted to new conditions. The changing body becomes our greatest teacher, offering lessons in patience, acceptance, and mindful care that youth rarely provides. In youth, the body is often taken for granted, pushed beyond limits, treated as though immortal. In age, the body becomes our Zen master, calling us back to the fundamental realities of existence, impermanence, limitation, the preciousness of what remains, the beauty of what is. The body that once allowed us to forget our mortality now becomes the gentle, persistent reminder that our time here is limited and therefore infinitely valuable. What wisdom have you gained from your body's changes that strength and speed could never teach you? As we age, the dance of connections becomes increasingly apparent. Some people enter our lives for decades, others for mere moments. Some remain until the end, others depart unexpectedly. With each passing year, this choreography of connection and separation becomes more complex. Friends move away, loved ones pass on, children grow into their own lives, and new souls arrive with unexpected gifts. What seemed in youth like a static social circle reveals itself to be an ever-shifting constellation of relationships, each with its own trajectory, purpose, and season. In Buddhism, relationships are like a river. Some drops travel together for miles, others quickly separate. Neither pattern is wrong. The water that parts ways around a stone reunites downstream. The brief tributary that joins only to diverge again still changes the river's composition forever. There is no perfect duration for human connection, only perfect attention to its unique qualities while it lasts. The childhood friend who accompanied us for decades holds no greater inherent value than the stranger whose single act of kindness altered our path. The measure isn't time, but transformation. Love without possession means appreciating the connection without demanding permanence. It's understanding that even brief encounters can transform us forever. Think of the mentor whose words guided you, though you worked together briefly. The friend from a distant chapter who shaped your thinking through intense conversation during a specific period. The stranger whose single act of compassion restored your faith in humanity. These connections need not last a lifetime to hold profound significance. Their value lies not in duration but in depth, not in permanence but in impact. What's shared between people, wisdom, kindness, love, leaves an indelible mark that remains even when physical presence ends. When someone teaches you to see the world differently, that perception remains long after they've gone. When someone shows you a deeper way to love, that capacity continues to develop within you. When someone helps you discover your own voice, that expression continues to evolve even if they no longer hear it. This is why the Buddhists say, when you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Not literally, of course, but as recognition that true teachings transform the student and continue independently of the teacher's presence. This is the art of compassionate detachment, honoring what was while valuing what is. It opens us to new, relational horizons, meaningful connections that remain possible at every stage of life. There is a particular grief that comes with age, the accumulation of goodbyes, but there is also a particular joy, the ongoing possibility of hellos. New friendships that form with surprising depth, connections across generations that would never have developed in youth, bonds formed through shared experience or understanding that wasn't available to our younger selves. The heart doesn't have a limited capacity for meaningful connection. It can continue to expand as long as we remain open to life's offerings. We live in a culture obsessed with youth, where billions are spent hiding the natural progression of time. Creams promise to erase evidence of life lived. Surgeries claim to turn back clocks that were never meant to reverse. Social media filters create alternate realities where aging simply doesn't happen. Advertisements feature faces frozen in perpetual youth, regardless of the product being sold. The message is relentless. Aging is failure, something to be hidden, denied, fought against with every resource available. This narrative causes immense suffering, transforming a natural process into a source of shame, anxiety, and self-rejection. But Buddhism offers a different perspective, one that transcends these superficial ideals of beauty and finds aesthetic value in the authentic unfolding of a human life. This viewpoint is embodied in concepts like wabi-sabi, the appreciation of imperfection, impermanence, and incompleteness, the beauty of the weathered, the worn, the asymmetrical, the poignancy of what shows its history rather than concealing it, the depth that comes only through the passage of time, the weathering of elements, the accumulation of experience. Consider this parable. The cherry blossom is admired for its brief, perfect bloom, its petals unmarked, its color vibrant, but fleeting. For a few days, it commands attention and praise, drawing crowds who come specifically to witness its perfect moment. But the ancient pine, weathered, twisted by winds, bearing the marks of centuries, is equally revered for its enduring strength and character. Its bark tells stories of survival, its irregular form speaks of resilience, its very imperfection becomes the source of its profound beauty. Both have value in Japanese aesthetics, just as both youth and age have their own particular magnificence. The cherry blossom isn't diminished by its brevity, nor the pine by its weathered appearance. Each embodies a different kind of perfection. Our culture sees wrinkles as flaws to be eliminated. But what if they are maps of wisdom, landscapes carved by laughter, concern, and contemplation? What if each line tells a story of emotional presence, rather than emotional absence? The crinkles around eyes that have lit up with joy thousands of times. The thoughtful furrow from years of deep consideration. The lines around the mouth from decades of expression. These aren't failures of youth, but achievements of living, physical manifestations of emotional engagement with the world and its inhabitants. Grey hair isn't failure, it's a crown of experience, earned through seasons of growth. In many traditional cultures, white hair was regarded with reverence rather than embarrassment, a visible sign of having weathered life's storms, accumulated wisdom, survived challenges that claimed many others. It marked the elder, the one who had seen enough to guide others, whose perspective had been enriched by decades of observation and participation. What might shift in our own experience if we reclaimed this perspective? If we saw silver strands as badges of honor rather than signs of decline? There comes a moment in every life when we truly see ourselves, not as we once were, but as we have become. A face marked by time, eyes that have witnessed decades of joy and sorrow, hands that tell stories of work and love. It arrives unexpectedly, perhaps while passing a window's reflection or studying an old photograph placed beside a new one. That moment of recognition, sometimes startling, sometimes gentle, sometimes accompanied by a sharp intake of breath. Is that really me? The stranger in the mirror who somehow holds your memories, carries your name, but wears a face transformed by thousands of days and nights of living. What if the greatest fear of aging, becoming a stranger to yourself, could transform into your greatest liberation? What if the very transformation we resist contains the seeds of wisdom that youth, in all its vibrant uncertainty, cannot access? What if this inevitable progression isn't punishment but invitation? a doorway into dimensions of understanding that remain forever sealed to those who haven't earned the right to wear time's impressions on their skin. We all face that moment of confrontation with change, when the mirror reveals someone we barely recognize, grey hairs where there were none, lines mapping journeys we've taken, a body transformed by the passage of time, that first silver strand that catches the light, announcing itself without apology, the gentle creases around smiling eyes that remain even when the smile fades, the subtle shifts in how we move through the world, more deliberate perhaps, less impulsive, more attuned to the body's messages. All these transformations arrive as messengers of time's constant flow, heralds of the great truth that nothing, not even our own physical form, remains unchanged. Yet the true challenge of aging isn't in the changes themselves, it's in our resistance to life's natural flow. It's in the energy we expend fighting what cannot be fought, denying what cannot be denied, hiding what need not be hidden. The suffering comes not from the aging, but from our desperate attempt to stand still in a river that has always been moving. From our culture's frantic insistence that youth alone holds value, from the countless hours and dollars spent trying to convince others and ourselves that time hasn't touched us, when in fact, time's touch might be exactly what gives us depth, character, and wisdom. In Buddhism, this concept is known as anicca, the profound truth of impermanence that runs through all existence. Everything changes, nothing remains the same, not for a day, not for an hour, not for an instant. From the cellular level where our entire body renews itself over time, to the cosmic level where stars are born and die, change isn't the exception, it is the only constant. The mountains that seem eternal are merely moving in time frames we cannot perceive. The seemingly solid chair beneath you consists of atoms in constant motion. Even in apparent stillness, transformation continues. This isn't merely a poetic idea, but the fundamental nature of reality itself. But here's the extraordinary promise that Buddhist wisdom offers. What if accepting this change isn't surrender, but freedom? What if aging isn't loss, but revelation? What if the very thing we've been conditioned to fear and resist is actually the doorway to our deepest peace? Consider for a moment what energy might be liberated if we stopped fighting the inevitable. Imagine the spaciousness that might open in our consciousness if we greeted each new line, each limitation, each transformation, not as enemy, but as teacher. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore 5 perspectives that could transform how you experience every passing year. 5 ancient wisdoms that, when applied to modern lives, have the potential to convert what many see as life's greatest burden into its most profound blessing. Perhaps our deepest fear isn't dying, it's being forgotten. We build monuments, create legacies, desperately trying to ensure our names echo through time. We carve them in stone, write them in books, embed them in family stories, all in the hope that something of us will remain when we no longer walk this earth. We create foundations bearing our names, establish scholarships, build buildings, write wills that distribute our possessions, all attempting to extend our influence beyond our physical presence. This hunger for permanence drives much of human achievement, yet often brings more suffering than peace. The pharaohs built pyramids and were still forgotten for centuries. Empires insist they will stand for 1,000 years, yet crumble. Even digital archives fail, corrupted by time or rendered obsolete by advancing technology. Buddhism offers a radical alternative through the concept of anatta, the understanding that there is no permanent, unchanging self to preserve in the first place. This isn't nihilism claiming we don't exist, but rather a profound recognition that what we call self is a flowing process rather than a fixed entity. We are like waves in the ocean of existence, arising, having our moment in the sun cresting, breaking on the shore, and returning to the whole. Neither created nor destroyed, but temporarily formed and eventually transformed. The wave doesn't die when it returns to the ocean, it simply continues in another form, inseparable from the waters that gave it birth. The distinction between wave and ocean was always somewhat arbitrary, a convenient label for a temporary formation rather than a fundamental reality. Our influence continues even when our names fade. As an ancient proverb reminds us, a candle can light 1,000 others without shortening its life. The flame passes from one to another, the same fire multiplied, not divided. Think of the unnamed teacher who encouraged a student who later changed the world. The anonymous craftsperson whose techniques were passed down through generations. The forgotten gardener who planted trees that shelter communities long after their name has vanished from memory. Their essence continues not in monuments built to preserve their identity, but in the living impact that flows through countless lives they've touched. This is the silent transmission, how our essence continues beyond our name. Not through being remembered, but through how we've changed others. Consider the kindness someone showed you decades ago that shaped your character. Do you remember their name? Perhaps not. But their influence lives in you still, and through you touches others. Like ripples in a pond, our actions continue long after the stone that caused them has sunk from sight. The question shifts from how will I be remembered to how will my presence here enrich the ongoing flow of life? The art of letting go isn't giving up, it's focusing on being fully present rather than eternally remembered. When we release our grip on permanence, we discover the beauty of contributing to life's endless flow. There is a particular lightness that comes when we stop carrying the burden of our own importance, a spaciousness that opens when we cease measuring our worth by how long our name might last. What if being forgotten isn't failure, but the natural and beautiful completion of our role in the greater story? What if anonymity is not punishment, but the ultimate freedom? Our bodies are our oldest companions on this journey. Yet as they change, we often feel betrayed by them. The knees that no longer spring upstairs, the eyes that need assistance to read beloved books, the heart that beats with a new irregularity. These changes can feel like abandonment rather than evolution. We speak of our bodies failing us, as though they had broken a promise, committed a treachery. We describe our changing forms in terms of loss, decline, deterioration, language that implies something is wrong rather than something is changing. Like leaves in autumn, physical transformation isn't failure, it's inevitable and natural. Each limitation carries its own hidden gift. The brilliant red and gold of fall foliage comes precisely because of change, not in spite of it. The leaf isn't dying, it's completing one phase of an eternal cycle, preparing for another. There is a particular beauty that belongs only to autumn, a wisdom that arrives only through winter. Similarly, there are insights and experiences uniquely available to the aging body, perspectives impossible to access in youth's endless summer. The slowing step that allows us to notice details we once rushed past. The need for glasses that reminds us to look more deeply at fewer things rather than glancing superficially at many. The aging body invites us to practices of reconciliation, not war against inevitable change, but peaceful negotiation with new realities. Listening with compassion to physical discomfort, not as punishment but as communication. The body's wisdom speaking, asking for attention, rest, care, or change. Moving mindfully, honoring new limitations rather than forcing old patterns, discovering that conscious movement brings awareness that rushed momentum never could, finding gratitude for what remains functional, the eyes that still see beauty, the ears that hear loved ones' voices, the heart that continues its faithful rhythm, rather than focusing exclusively on what has changed or diminished.